Hello, Martyn. It's amazing to have you on my podcast.
Hi, no, thank
And
you. Thank you for the invite, and it's really nice to see you again.
we have been friends, I can say friends for a
Yes,
while.
yeah, absolutely.
when first time we met was when you were an MP for Scottish National Party. And of course, that was back in 2024, before the elections were called up. And yeah, you were telling me some of the most interesting stuff I've ever heard about election analytics. And then I went home and tried to digest all that, but I feel like I still didn't get
Well,
I still didn't get the substance of it.
happy to share. Happy to share any of my thoughts on any aspects you want to interrogate me on. So just fire away.
I remember you were telling me about the strategies you use in order to win elections.
Yes.
Like in terms of how many voters do you actually need to in the first past the post system, how many voters do you actually have to convince to vote for yourself, and how many voters you can just ignore them as long as
Yeah.
others are secured.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. Well, that's it. It's all about all political campaigning is about building relationships with people, and to win on any system, you need to get votes in the ballot box. And first past the post, it's a simple majority, which means you could win an election with a fairly derisory share of the vote, as long as you have one vote more than your nearest opponent. So you don't need to be massively popular, you just have to be the least despised almost in some respects. So
Okay, yeah.
so
We
once
can put it this way.
once you accept that, it's all about getting as many of your supporters as you can to turn out and vote for you. So you don't need to. In fact, it's counterproductive in the heat of an election to noise up people who are diametrically opposed to your views. Because if you encourage them to vote, they will vote for one of your opponents, quite possibly tactically for the opponent best placed to beat you, and it's very negative. So it pays to you need to speak to these people in between elections to try and persuade them and bring them round and know if they're changing their views, but you don't want to speak to them in the white heat of a immediacy of a campaign. So with all that information you have from years of going round the doors, you know people that have told you 3 and 4 times that they're not voting for you. So you would not go near those people during the closing stages of an election campaign, because just by being on their doorstep would typically increase the likelihood of them voting perhaps by as much as 10%. So that would be counterproductive to you. But going to the door of a supporter or somebody sympathetic to you would be perhaps 10% more likely to turn out, because you've engaged with them, reminded them it's on, told them that their vote is really important for you to get back. All of that makes a difference. And you could think of this like a football manager. I've successfully ran and been elected in 7 different electoral contests, but the last one wasn't successful. So 1 out of 8 failures, not a bad ratio, but you're only as good as your last result. So I am now between seats, for want of a better expression.
Yeah, but what's the math behind that? What's the percentage of votes that you need to win in order to win in the election, or what's the percentage of people you need to convince to vote for you?
It's all very different, because it is, as I said earlier, a simple majority. So 1 vote more than your nearest opponent. And in many respects, it's not a particularly representative form of democracy. It is democratic because people can vote for whoever they want and anyone can stand for election. So all the tenets of democracy are there, but the outcome isn't particularly proportionate, because each area has 1 rep. There are advantages to that, because you build a relationship with that community and everybody knows they go to you. But it means the diversity of opinions that you have in the society are not necessarily reflected, because I don't want to bore people with mathematics, but if it's the best example, because one of the closest contests I had was my first ever council election. So I'm going back to 1999, first past the post result. in those days. In Scotland
That's
now,
a long time ago.
a long time ago. Nowadays, we don't have first past the post elections for councils. We have a single transferable vote system electing multiple councillors, which is fairer. But in the days when I was first elected, that was how it was, old-fashioned first past the post. And I was elected on an 84% turnout. It might have been the highest council turnout in the country. It was on the same day as the Scottish Parliament, so people were coming out to vote for the Parliament election, and that boosted the turnout quite a bit. And I was in an area that had a higher number of, shall we say, affluent people who were more likely to vote, a higher number of older people who were also more likely to vote, and a community that was engaged, which also meant it was more likely to vote. So every demographic was more likely to vote in the area I was standing in, and it was a huge turnout. I scraped in on my first election with a council vote majority of 21 votes, and I had 34% of the vote. My nearest opponent had 33.5%, right? So if you take that, I wasn't the popular choice of the majority of the people that elected me. Now, there's an
it makes sense.
There's an inherent problem there. Now, in mathematical terms, they would talk about the effective vote. So the effective vote to get, I had, and just to give you the numbers, I had 1,040 votes. So effectively, 1,019 or 1,020 of them were effective. If I'd got 1,020 votes, I would have won by one. So I had 20 votes more than I needed, surplus votes. So they didn't really count. They just added to my very slender majority. And basically, the other, let me just do my maths, 66.5% of the, not 76, sorry, 66.5% of the population's votes were what we would call wasted. They voted for candidates that didn't get elected. So you had basically 2/3 of the electorate's vote was either wasted because it didn't count to getting anyone elected, or was surplus, albeit very few were surplus. So the effective vote was tiny. And
it would make sense to make those people vote again to see who really is the most popular candidate.
And that's
to choose between the two.
To choose between the two, yeah. And that is now what effectively happens in Scotland with the single transferable vote. And it's the same in the London Assembly elections and the Welsh Assembly and Northern Ireland. So there's now an STV vote, and between 3 and 4 candidates will get elected if they reach the quota, and votes transfer, so that the people need to get that quota to be elected. And I think that is inherently fairer. I can't, that's the positive side. The negative side, of course, is that I haven't seen the evidence, and this has been in place since, let me think, 2008 in Scotland. I haven't seen the evidence that it's led to a more consensual and cooperative style of politics. You still have the Yaboo sucks and the personality clashes and everything that you had under first past the post, but at least more people have someone that they support as an elected representative, and that has to be better. I just wish it was more consensual.
Certainly makes sense for you, but it's always been interesting for me how you run in the Scottish National Party, right?
Yeah.
And not many people consider this as a party. Of course, not many people consider it as a party that's going to take many seats constantly. But what are the main goals that drive this party forward?
The main goal, and the reason I joined the SNP, I didn't join because I wanted a career in politics. In fact, that was probably the last thing on my mind when I did join. I joined because the SNP was founded to get an independent Scotland. So it was all about delivering Scottish independence, and I believed in that as a philosophy and way of life. Now, I was a cultural nationalist. In my early years, I loved the history and the folk music, and I took a similar interest in the history and folk music in that of other countries. So it's in many ways an internationalist as well. But I believe passionately that Scotland was a nation, and that the best people to make decisions for any nation are the people of that nation. And that's why I became a political nationalist as well as a cultural nationalist. And I got involved in the late 1980s, which wasn't a good time for Scottish nationalism. We were floating around 10, 11, 12% in the opinion polls at the early part when I joined, so it was not a career move. You didn't join. Here's a movement on the up. It was very much.
Yeah, which is why I asked. It's really interesting.
Very much a movement that was stagnant, and I believed that we should be independent. And I thought, well, if people like myself don't get off our backsides and do something about it, it won't happen. So I joined, and I think there's a bit of thornness. I don't know if that's a word that's known by your viewers. Thornness, sort of. Trying to think of the English translation for that. Just awkwardness, rebelliousness, and I think in the Scottish people that we like the underdog, and nobody's going to tell us you can't do something or whatever. So you sort of rebel against that. So if anything, my joining at a time when it was at a low point was probably typical of that Scottish attitude that, we'll see about this.
Was it just an act of rebellion?
Yes, we'll see about this.
For you to join the party.
This party's not going anywhere. I'll soon see about that. And the rest, as they say, is history. I then suggested that things should be done differently in the local branch on a number of organisational things, and it was all common sense stuff, by the way. I wasn't reinventing the wheel. It's just that in the late 1970s, the SNP had kind of fallen off the cliff after we didn't get devolution, and people's energy was sapped. They were disillusioned. They felt it wasn't going anywhere, and there was some splits as well, and all that didn't help. So sort of a decade later, we were still coming out of that period, and a lot of the people that had been really good organisers and been really active had either dropped out of activity or had just got too old. There was a few of them there, but there weren't enough to lift it up. So people like myself coming in and helping made a difference. And we didn't reinvent the wheel, because what I thought, why don't we do this or do that, were things that the people before me had been doing 15, 20 years earlier. So I was just getting people back on track. And from that, a decade or so later, I stood for the council, as I said, in 1999 and got elected by the skin of my teeth. I built my vote up. I got a much bigger majority the next time, 450 votes majority, better than 21. And of course, lots of naysayers, you always get them, told me, you're going to get beat, Martyn, you're not going to hold the seat with that majority. And I'd been at more than 21 friends and families' funerals in that 5 years. So you could say, well, I could see how it's dropped. This could be fatal, but it wasn't, because we'd done the work. And as we said, we'd gone out and we'd knocked all the doors. We'd spoke to almost 80% of the electorate in that 5 years. And we knew people that were rock solid. We knew people that were not aligned. We knew folk that wouldn't have touched me for a barge pole, if I'd been on fire, they wouldn't have put me out. They just didn't want to know us. So you knew to ignore them, you knew to pull out the ones that were ours, and you knew to go back and engage with the ones that were neutral. And we were able to do that, and we got a thumping majority the next time. And then, I was re-elected the next time after that, but they changed the system on me. And that's when they brought in the single transferable vote multi-member system. And the wards all changed, and I was successfully re-elected with a vote, a good share of the vote. We had the largest share of my party, but we just missed out getting the 2 seats out of the 3-member ward. My fellow councillor was a man named Tam Smith, still alive, a lovely guy, real community-focused guy. He was a councillor before I was. He lost out, and I gained. And because of the single transferable vote, and I know, I'm grateful for the support I got, and Tam gave me huge support. But people that we tried to tell to vote for Tam voted for me. My name was alphabetically higher. This is the problem you have with STV, that people, if they're voting for a party, will vote down the ballot paper. So the alphabetically advantaged candidate gets a disproportionate share of the party vote. We also were the only party standing 2 candidates. And there's another problem if you've got multiple candidates. This affects every party that's in this.
So the person which name starts with A gets more votes because he's seen
Yes.
on the ballot paper first.
What we do is we tell people in different streets to vote differently to try and manage that, so try and equalise the vote between our two candidates. But people don't do that. Some do, but some people will go in and just vote, I'm voting SNP or I'm voting Labour, I'm voting Tory, and they'll go down the paper. And if there's 2 candidates or 3 candidates from that party standing, they'll just go 1, 2, 3 in the order they appear. So, and this is an interesting point. So the psephologists will be thoroughly excited when I get into this bit of anarchism now. There's an interesting debate is when you've got more than one candidate and you split the territory. So what you do is you give a larger share of the territory to the second alphabetical candidate, because some of the people in that area will not listen to you telling you to vote for that person first. They'll vote for whoever's first on the ballot paper. So we split it disproportionately in the hope that helps even up the vote between the 2 candidates. And then what you hope is that you get enough votes for both to be elected, or not few enough that one of your candidates gets eliminated, and that other people get eliminated before you, and you get transfers that come in. So you want to keep both your candidates in play, or 3 if you have 3. So that's how much harder one to pull off. So that was part of it. And the other problem we had was, as I was saying, because we were the only party with 2 candidates in that ward, some of the people, and it was a bigger problem in 2008, which was the first time we had the single transferable vote election, was people went in and voted with crosses, not numbers. So if you vote in an election with a cross instead of a number 1, they'll count your cross as a number 1. But if you go in and vote with 2 crosses, I'm voting for both of those candidates, you can't identify which is the preference vote. So the votes don't count. And sadly, Tam lost out by a smaller margin than we had 2 crosses.
So wait, if the person puts 2 crosses as opposed to putting numbers, then what happens again?
Their vote doesn't count.
The vote doesn't count, so he only has to vote for one.
One or more. One. Yeah, if they put 1 cross, the vote would count as a vote. If they put 2 crosses or 3 crosses, it doesn't count at all. And if they put a 1, 2, 3, you could vote for everybody on the ballot paper in the order that you like them. The vote would keep transferring until it exhausted. So your vote under STV can elect more than 1 person. But they have to vote for people in the order that they want them elected. And that's hard to explain to people on a quick 30-second or 2-minute conversation on a doorstep. And when it's the only election that you have using that system, and the other elections use crosses, people get it wrong.
Okay, so with the crosses system, when you put 2 crosses for 2 different candidates, it means that the vote doesn't count.
Doesn't count, no.
What do you mean by the vote doesn't count? It doesn't count for a certain party, or it doesn't count for any of them?
Doesn't count for anyone. It's the same if they put the same number twice. So say, for example, there's 7 candidates standing. You could rank each of those candidates in the order you like. 1 for your first choice, 2 for your second, all the way down to the person that you don't want, so you voted for everybody in front of them. That's the only negative vote you can give with STV, so you have to vote for everybody except the person or the person at the last. But if you mix up your numbers, because you're not putting them down 1, 2, 3 in the order they're on the ballot paper, you're going 1, 2, 0, back up for 3. So people can, at some stage, particularly with the lower preferences, they know who they want first. That's usually pretty straightforward. They might know who their second choice is if they have one. But then once they get down to 4 or 5, you see people occasionally put 2 5s because they've lost count of where they've got to in the numbers. So it will count up to the point where there's 2 of the same. So it'll be a good vote, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it would be excluded if they had 2 5s. And it's the same with 2 X's. It just doesn't count for anyone because they can't attribute who the first preference is.
Makes sense.
So it's very frustrating. And I don't know how we educate.
And why did that happen? Why were the two of the people from the same party, your party, were running for the same council?
Well, in that election, the first single transferable vote, the multi-member wards were made up of the original previous single member wards. And in the area I was standing in, the town I was representing, there were 3 sitting councillors. 2 of us were SNP and 1 was a Tory, and we both stood. We came very close to winning 2 seats.
So you thought that there is a higher probability if you run 2 of the candidates for that specific council, rather than if you split, 1 runs for that council and 1 runs for this council?
Yes, well, there'll be other SNP candidates in the neighbouring seats. And similar things happened there as well. Yes.
Yeah.
So we put up the 2. We almost got the 2, and we didn't. And that is the problem. What we now have is a slightly different problem. In that, I think, while it's still frustrating that people get the voting wrong, they put multiple crosses, or they get the numbers mixed up, or they vote alphabetically rather than for the individuals that we would like them to vote for in the order. The bigger problem the parties have now is transfers, and we're seeing that with by-elections. My party is still the most popular party in Scotland. We're not as high in the opinion polls as we were a few years ago. We're in the mid-30s at the moment, whereas you go back to 2015, we were pushing 50% of the vote. So we've dropped back a bit. And the problem that then gives us is
what's a transfer?
What is a transfer?
Yeah.
Transfer is if a candidate for these STV elections, and this is the council, gets the quota in the first round, they're automatically elected. So if they are automatically elected, the votes they had above the quota would get transferred to the next candidate, the next choice that the people gave.
Makes sense.
If nobody
from the same party,
or whatever party that the people
from their second choice,
from the person's voter's second choice. In most cases where there's more than one candidate standing from a party, the majority of those second choices will be for the same party, but they won't all be. So it can change the outcome of the elections. If nobody gets elected, they eliminate the person at the bottom with the fewest votes, and their votes transfer to their next choice. And this process keeps going until all the available positions are filled, if it's 3 members or 4 members.
Right.
And it is a better system, but it would be a better system if it was the only system we used. The problem I think we have is that we have other elections under first past the post, which people have traditionally been used to. In the Scottish Parliament, we also have a list system where there are constituency members elected first past the post and other members returned on a top-up list system, which is a different system as well. Cognitively, the voter votes...
What's that about? What's this one about? This system?
Yeah, well, cognitively, the voter votes with crosses on both ballot papers. They get 2 ballot papers for the Scottish Parliament. They get just like for Westminster, they get a constituency member and they vote with a cross, simple majority, whoever gets the most crosses wins. Right, that's easy. Then they have a regional list, and Scotland is split into 8 regions, and these regions will elect 7 or 8 members each, and it's a top-up to get a more proportional parliament. So what they do, it's for the anoraks out there in the world, it's the De Hont system. It's a version of the De Hont, a Dutch system of proportional representation. So they divide, and it's 2 separate ballots. So this is an important point to make. So you've got the constituency ballot and you've got the regional list ballot. So they're 2 separate ballots filled in by the voter at the same time and put into hopefully 2 different ballot boxes. If not, that gets sorted out of the count. It just slows things down. It doesn't, the votes get counted. It doesn't cause a problem that respect. It just delays it for the rest of us. But they put in 2 separate boxes and they count the constituency ones first. So you know who's won the local constituency, just as they would for Westminster. Then they count the regional list votes and they count the full vote in each constituency and add them up across the entire region. So that might mean different local authority areas, counts happening in different places, and these results will be collated at one central point in each region. And they will then announce the regional list. And the regional list, each party that's standing on the regional list has pre-listed its candidates in the order they would like them elected. So the public don't get to pick which order the party candidates are. They just get to pick which party they would like these additional candidates to come from. And to allocate the seats, and this is where it gets, where you get your calculator out and it gets a bit complicated. They divide.
It's already got complicated.
It is, yes. It's a difficult one to work out what's happening on the night because you only see a fraction of what's going on. They divide the vote.
So it's basically okay, to sum everything up quickly.
Yes.
It's like putting two systems together.
Yes.
And then setting up a list of all the candidates.
Yes.
And then this lists all of the people who are the top
the two votes are tied, although they're separate, because they divide the regional list vote by the number of seats that party has already won in the constituencies plus one.
Yeah,
right.
To make it representative.
And then whoever's got the most votes gets the top-up seat, and then they keep doing that until they've allocated the full list of top-up seats. So it's a fairly complex system. It does give a much more proportionate system. I think of the two proportionate systems, I prefer intellectually the single transferable vote because the power rests with the voter. The voter gets to pick whichever candidates they want in whichever order. So, but with the closed list system, they get a more proportionate parliament representing the political parties they want, but they don't get to pick the individual candidates because the parties pick the regional candidates. So for me, personally, I think single transferable is a fairer way of doing it, albeit a lot more complicated to count.
Yeah. Anyway, let's go from a more complicated part to a more abstract conversation. In terms of how do you persuade? You said you knock on the doors, you do campaigning. That's obvious. People know what that means. But how do you persuade people to vote for you? What do you? Of course, it's not like directly promising something. It can be subtle, right?
Yeah. Oh, yes. I mean, you do all of that. You tell people what you've done in the past so that they should trust you to do similar things in the future. You tell them what you want to achieve because people, most people, if they're making a genuine choice, they're choosing aspirationally what they want to see happen. So you try and chime with that. And you go out there and you basically try and persuade them. Some people don't need persuaded because they are fixed in how they're going to vote, but you want to meet as many people who aren't and, have that relationship, love them to death, speak to them, send them leaflets that represent the issues they care about, try and target the material you give them so it's relevant. You can have the best policy in the world, on animal experimentation, for example, but if the person's more interested in, farming rather than animal exploitation, you might be halfway there. You're talking about an animal rights issue, but not the stuff they're interested in. So you've got to get it tailored to the person you're speaking to. And the better you do with that, the more people will chime with what you're saying and will trust you when they go out. The other bit, of course, and this is more what our elected representatives do, is you, in the process of going out and speaking to people, you get complaints. You get stuff that they're not happy with. So you deal with those as surgery type issues and you try and get results for people. And as a party machine, you'll have councillors in every ward in an area. We've got different levels of parliamentarians, be it at the Scottish Parliament, some at Westminster, a few of them we had, and they're all doing a bit of that. So you get a reputation for delivering results and people start to trust you as an individual or your party because they feel anytime they go to one of the reps, they get the result they're looking for or somebody really tries to get them the result. The opposite is also true. If your opponents, because they've got councillors in every ward as well, because there's multi-member wards, if they do a better job, their party will start pulling votes away from you. So you've got to be out there working all the time as a political organisation.
So it's a process, not only you do campaigning and persuading when it's near to the election, you do it all of the time.
All year round, all the way through. And there was an old Scottish politician who never got elected. He was a member, I think, of the Independent Labour Party and then the Labour Party, and then he joined the SNP. And his name was Oliver Brown. He was up until the 1960s, so sort of 40s all the way through to the 60s, this guy was quite influential as an intellectual and a wit. He had a great sense of humour. And one of his lines, and I've used it a few times, and I'll credit him for it because it's a great line. Elections are for people who don't take politics that seriously, was what he used to say. It's for Joe Public just going along, hearing a bit in the news, reading a couple of headlines, and putting across 15 minutes, 20 minutes out of their day once every 4 or 5 years. That's not a huge involvement, but the folk that take it seriously are out there doing it all the time, and you've got to do that to get the result.
Makes sense. Tell a bit more about your life after you have been, because you have worked in the parliament as an MP for how many years?
9 years.
9 years.
Yeah, 9 years.
So that's two cycles of MPs.
Well, I was there, and this will give you a slight laugh. I was there during that whole period of madness around the Brexit period. So I actually was Brexit, yeah. I was successfully elected 3 times. So 3 terms were squeezed into those 9 years. Right. Since I became 18 and had the vote, there have been, from that point right up till the current day, and that includes Keir Starmer as the current Prime Minister, 11 Prime Ministers in my political voting lifetime. There were a few more before I was 18, but since I've had the vote, there's been 11. I saw 5 of those Prime Ministers in the 9 years I was in Parliament. Such was the turnover and the sort of turmoil of the political period. So I think that's an unprecedented part of history that I've sat through. I should have kept a diary, because nobody will believe.
Maybe an indication of lack of leadership going on in the UK.
I think part of it was, yes, and there was I think in some ways a pursuit of populism as well, and that I don't think ends well. You need to be focused on real life and delivering long-term results. And yeah.
But how's your life after your work? It's like for me, okay, so how I imagine it, because I've never been an MP, but how I imagine it is kind of like a life after being a footballer. You have to find yourself somewhere else. You've done your main work.
You do.
You're kind of confused now. What you're supposed to do?
Yeah, it all comes to an end, and you have to untangle everything. I was, unlucky to not win, but fortunate to have lost in 2024 and not one of the previous elections, because the process has been streamlined a bit and made easier, and there's a longer wind-up period. And believe me, it took 4 months to wind up the office and get all the contracts cancelled and make the staff redundant and all the things that go with that. And then you have to look for something to do to pay the bills. And I'm still very much in that process, I have to say. I'm doing some part-time work, and I'm also trying to, amongst other things, set up a small video production company with one of my friends. So we're doing some free stuff for the now to build up a portfolio to then hopefully make some money, and that will give me a creative outlet. My political outlets, I have taken on a number of roles. I was always a political activist when I was elected and before I was elected, so it comes as no surprise that following no longer being elected, I've back in the frontline trenches again. I've taken on the role of convener of my local party branch. I've also taken on a co-convener role for a broader cross-party group, the Scottish Independence Convention, which is one of the cross-party bodies trying to bring different parts of the movement together to push for independence, very much in line with my own views in the SNP, but it brings in broader views as well. And I've taken on a non-executive directorship with the International Association for Democracy, which is a Scottish charity set up looking at democratic events. And it was set up after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. That was what prompted the people to set it up. So I've got a few outlets there that give me outlets on the issues I'm interested in, on democracy, on human rights, and on Scottish independence. So I'm keeping myself busy. I've been a local election agent for a by-election that happened in my old constituency area. And I'm probably going to do the same again in the next few weeks, because we've got another one. So that allows me to use my skills and knowledge base and support the campaign going forward. And I'm waiting to see what the future opens up for me. I've not retired from elected politics. I'm just between seats, is the way I see it. I'm looking to see when the next opportunity comes. And the advantage of being in Scotland is we have a Scottish Parliament as well as the Westminster avenue for elected politics. So I will watch with interest to see if any opportunities open up for the elections next year for that. If they do, and they're local enough for me, I'm not running around the country trying to be a candidate because I want to be a candidate. I'm rooted in my own area and the neighbouring communities that I've got connections with. If that happens, good. If it doesn't, keep my head down and look at trying to win back my old seat the next time. And the current opinion polls are now suggesting I would win if the election was held now. So all of that's, encouraging, just disappointing we didn't get it on the night.
Well, good luck to you with that ambitions, and I hope everything goes right. In terms of young people, I think many of them who are interested in politics now are not only trying to become more involved, etc., but also trying to become MPs, and there are plenty of people trying to run for the same roles, aiming for the same positions. I was wondering whether you would advise these people to do so, or that's not worth it.
Well, I was lucky in politics because a bit of luck comes into it as well. You can come down the wrong side of the wire and just, no amount of effort can count for luck. So it's good to be lucky and good. But if you're going to be one or the other, sometimes lucky is better than good. But I had lots of family support, and you do need a support mechanism if you're going to do it. So that would be my advice, because it can be a pretty lonely role. And I don't mean, nobody talks to you, and quite the opposite. Everybody talks to you, but you need people you can confide in, and you can let off steam, and you can say the things that you could never say in public, just to stay sane.
Because you have your own views, and you have the views you express in public.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether you are reform people who are, known for expressing their views straight away, you still keep some of the views. You still keep some of the views, from the people. You don't know. You don't want something.
Yeah, I don't think I ever moderated what I believed in. I always focused on what I believed in. But you will deal with people, and most people are lovely, and you want to help them. So there's an encouragement, and they want you to help them. You want to help them, and you do your best. But some people are absolutely obnoxious, can be toxic, and you will encounter those. So you need a thick skin, and you have to remember that they are the minority, and not to rise to them or respond to them on social media. So that would be the main part of my advice. And I think younger people get it a bit worse than us middle-aged folk, because they've been brought up with social media, so they feel it more. Whereas, I just turn it off and don't look at it and think, I don't know, that person doesn't mean anything to me. But others take it much more personally, and you've got to get that thick skin, and
that's the point of social media. I mean, you get comments and it forces you to reply.
Well, you don't always have to.
I felt that myself.
You don't always have to reply.
I have to reply to this comment.
No, you don't always have to reply. That's the first thing you've got to get. And the other thing is, sometimes the correct response is just to block someone. If they are just completely negative, don't put up with it. So, if they're polite and they've got a different viewpoint, that's different. That's engage with them, and other people will see your response, and you might win folk over. And engagement is good for the posts going in front of more people. But if they're not polite and respectful, don't engage with them. That's my my best advice for them. My mother gave me advice. She was quite happy with me when I was a councillor. I was able to live locally. I was home every night. I did all that, and she gave me great support. And she gave me great support when I went for Parliament as well. But when I told her I was going to stand for Parliament, she says, "Do you really want to do that? Nobody in their right mind would want to do that." and that's probably was good advice that I didn't take. But you need people to do it, and it needs a broad cross section of society. So yes, you need everybody taking an interest, taking a part, to get a representative parliament. So I would say to young people doing it, yes, they should do it, but go into it with their eyes open and be prepared to have a thick skin. And one thing that you need to learn, and I've done elected politics for 25 years on different levels, and it's very hard to do this. You have to learn to say no. And I don't think I've managed that part.
Learn what?
Learn to say no, because you have to turn things down.
Say no, okay. Yeah.
Because if you don't turn things down, you have no time to yourself at all. And you want to do stuff, and you want to do more, and you want to help. So you accept more things than you should, and it's your family that suffers. You're out there enjoying yourself or getting a name for, he's great, he always turns up, but it's the rest of your social life that suffers, and that impacts the other people that matter to you. So, and I wasn't good at that. You'll get a much more interesting podcast when you speak to the family and say, what's it like being a member of a politician? And that would maybe frighten people off, but seriously, you need to try, and it's not easy. So.
And I'm glad you didn't say no to this podcast.
No, well, as I said, I'm not good at saying no. I usually wear a badge that says yes. I'm a yes man for independence, and I say yes to almost everything that comes up. But I do enjoy engagement, and I do enjoy a good political blether and a discussion. So that's an easy one. I was out on Saturday night as a guest speaker at the Hindu Economic Forum's Scottish chapter launch, and that was great fun as well. And we just keep doing these.
It's unfortunate. Yeah. It's unfortunate we can't keep going for any longer. The time is running out. But thank you so much for your time. It has been amazing.
Yeah, no
Certainly,
problem.
I got to know something that I didn't know before, and maybe missed the first time we talked.
Yes, and if in 6 months or a year's time you want to follow up, just give me a shout, and be more than happy to.
If the audience asks for part 2, you have to do it. Okay, yeah, thank you so much.